there are two traditions at the moment in African literature. And the one is, I'll call it the traditionalist outlook, whose leader I would say is Chinua Achebe, the Nigerian novelist. And also I would say Ngugi wa Thiong'o is also in the traditionalist group. And then there's the other sort of, I'd call it the modernist group, as represented by Soyinka, Iwole Soyinka. He's a novelist, he's a playwright, he's also a lecturer, a senior lecturer. No, he's also a professor, I think. He's not a professor. Soyinka and Aikwe Ama, and myself. I would include myself in that group. Now, the three of us are always described as individualists, and the word individualist here is used in a very insulting way. If people accuse you of individualism, they're actually saying you are reactionary, you are capitalist in your approach to art. You're not one of the people. You're not a writer of the people. Aikwe Ama, now, what has happened to those three writers? So Inca, more or less, he was jailed for, I think, 15 months by the Nigerian government in detention under emergency powers. Aikwe Ama had to leave his country. Aikwe Ama is from Ghana. He had to leave his country, and he now lives out of a suitcase. From one university to another, giving lectures. I think right now he's teaching at Lesotho University. Before that, he was teaching at the University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania. Before that, he was in another country, and so on and so on and so on. And then, of course, you know what has happened to myself. Now, the sort of modernist sort of group, they always tend to be accused of intellectualism, of having been influenced by European writers and using European techniques. And as it were, through the sheer intellectualism and internationalism of their works, they are said to be, as it were, enemies of, well, that they're not part of the decolonization process or the process of fighting neocolonialism. The traditionalist group is the one which is very strongly approved of here in Zimbabwe. Because you see, their writing is very moral, it's easily used in schools as textbooks. And also, especially in terms of Ngugi, it is very, well, it is socialist. Ngugi is very a committed socialist writer. And I like his works, but he disturbs me only about one thing. He believes that writing is not a profession, but an instrument for the masses to come to power, and that therefore a writer should write about their struggles and how they should struggle and have victory in the end. Achebe also sees the African writer's main job as being a teacher of his community, teaching them their history, their traditions, and therefore giving them back the self-respect which colonialism and the slave trade took away.
How do you think about it?
Well, as you can see, I look at everything from all sides, and I do not have. I just simply do my work, and frankly, I have a problem about defining my own role as a writer, if I have a role at all. I merely see my duty as simply to write and write and write and write, and then leave the definitions to the critics, to the serious critics, the academic critics, to anyone who reads my books. I always simply say, look, make up your own mind. You've read the books. But can you leave a crate of beer? The thing is that most of what is considered African literature today started, the majority of the works started after the Second World War. And the first major literary movement in Africa was called negritude. Leopold Senghor, who was, I think, president of Senegal or Guinea, or he was the main exponent of negritude. And you see, negritude was simply that the writer's job is to glorify everything African, especially to glorify the African woman, to glorify all African traditions, to glorify all African art, and in a sense, in other words, everything that was Negro. You see, it's called negritude because at that time they still referred to themselves as Negroes. That was a phase in the from 1945 right up to 1962, I think, yeah, 62. And the main focus was Mbari Publications, which was founded by Nigerian negritude writers. In other words, for them, the African writer had a job to do, and that was to, as it were, simply glorify everything black and everything African. It was like the American equivalent of black power. And definitely it had elements of racism. There are many exponents, Leopold Senghor, and the black writer from Martinique, Aim Cesar, Aime. But people like, Soyinka refused to have anything to do with negritude. He ridiculed it in a famous remark when he said, "Can a tiger have tigritude? Can a tiger have tigritude?" And so this is from long back in the early 60s. So Soyinka has always been at odds with any prescriptive idea about the writer, about the African writer. Like me, he will not be defined. He refuses to be part of any literary movement. This is going back to the 1960s. And even Achebe was very reticent about negritude, though it was in line with his idea that blacks in Africa should be taught their history and their historical destiny.
Did you get any influence of African writers as well?
Soyinka especially. Soyinka. And actually, and also even Ngugi. The first book by an African writer I wrote, I was about to say by a black writer, but by an African writer I read was Ngugi's first novel, Weep Not Child. And it really surprised me. I was in Form 1, I think, at the time, and I'd gone to the library. And I had read most of the books in the library for the junior secondary school people. And then suddenly I found this book, and when I looked at it on the back cover, there was a photograph of the writer, and it surprised me because up to that point, I had never naturally thought that blacks can also be writers. I'd always seen it as something which only whites are able to do. And this may show you something of the horrors of my upbringing. I was so shocked and surprised and really pleased. I immediately got it out of the library, and I read it several times. And I said to myself, well, if another African can do it, I'm going to do it.